What's going on, guys? It's NYPrepper here. In this video, I want to talk about cannibals after SHTF or after a collapse of society. I want to talk about how to deal with cannibals and how to protect yourself from cannibals after SHTF. You know, it sounds kind of like a far-fetched thing, but, you know, this is something that I think we should all think about at least once in our life is, what would you do if, it was a collapse of society, okay, an SHTF situation, which stands for shit hits the fan, or WROL, without rule of law, Tiatiawaki, which is the end of the world as we know it. All right, I think all of us should think about at least once, what would we do to protect ourselves and our families from cannibals after a collapse of society, or SHTF, WROL, Tiatiawaki, all right? And I know it's kind of, diving into a little bit, fictional, kind of far-fetched type thing, but, I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about. So it's kind of, on one side, it's a fun thing to talk about. We're heading into a weekend, so I kind of want to keep it fun and light. And on the other side, I think it's also important to think about, because there is a very real possibility, that one of us, that we may have to deal with cannibals, after a collapse of society. So, so that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. I have a list of notes here on my laptop that I'm going to read off to you guys, of things that I thought about and, ideas that I brainstormed on how you can protect yourself from cannibals after SHTF and how to deal with them and make sure that you don't end up on somebody else's dinner plate, okay? So, all right, so the first thing, before we get into the specifics of how you can protect yourself from cannibals, is I want to, talk about some real world examples of cannibals and why, we need to be concerned about cannibals, all right? Because most people don't think that cannibals are really that much of a threat. They only associate cannibals with things they've seen on TV and in movies, Hannibal Lecter and stuff like that, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All right, but there really are a lot of examples in the real world of cannibalism, okay? And when we talk about cannibalism, we're talking about two varieties of cannibalism. You have sadistic cannibalism, and then you have extreme starvation cannibalism, all right? So that's kind of how I'm going to categorize the, cannibalism, because you have two types. You have cannibalism that is caused by extreme starvation. So when people start to get really hungry, they start to lose their minds and they don't think rationally anymore, and they start to consider eating other people as a source of survival, okay? And that actually has happened in real life a lot of times. The most classic example of that was the hikers that got stuck on, I think it was Mount Everest or somewhere in the Himalayas. The group of hikers, they made a movie about it. I forget the name. But, basically these, seasoned mountain climbers were in the Himalayas, and they got stranded, and they had no food. And, obviously you're on the top of a mountain. You're not going to be able to hunt a deer or trap a squirrel. Okay, so they had nothing to eat, and they ended up eating each other for survival. And, that was just one example. But, in this video, and then obviously there's other examples, but that's an example of extreme starvation causing people to, resort to cannibalism. All right. And, that's a very real possibility after a collapse of society. Obviously people are not going to have the amount of food that they normally have. So, that's a very real possibility. But what's more concerning to me is sadistic cannibalism, all right? And these are the types of people like Jeffrey Dahmer, Okay, Jeffrey Dahmer killed people. You know, he like skinned them, collected their body parts. He ate, he ate their body parts and stuff like that. And you can speak to psychologists about that, but that's a lot different than the hikers that were stranded, the mountain climbers that were stranded in the Himalayas who did that for survival reasons. They basically came to a mutual conclusion that, one person was going to have to sacrifice themselves so the others could live. And that's a lot different than somebody who goes out killing people and collecting their body parts and wearing their skins. That's totally different. Now, I'm not saying that, if you're in a survival situation with other people, that you should eat each other and do heads or tails to determine who gets eaten. I'm not saying that you should do that, but, sadistic cannibals are going to be the ones that you really have to worry about. And I think also a lot of people that are driven to the point of madness from extreme starvation, they're also going to be a threat, okay? But the sadistic cannibals like Jeffrey Dahmer, those are people that have a criminal personality. They're psychopathic. And what makes psychopaths and criminals dangerous is they're extremely intelligent people. So a lot of people think that, guys like Jeffrey Dahmer are stupid and savage, but they're actually not savage at all. They're savage in the way that they kill people and, but they're more sadistic than savage. They're actually very cunning and very calculated people that are very smart and they know what they're doing. They know how to hide their crimes so they don't get caught by the law, so they can continue to kill and eat people or whatever. And, their whole goal at it, like guys like Jeffrey Dahmer, their goal is they're sadistic people. So they get, pleasure out of watching other people's pain. And, they're psychopaths, they enjoy, killing people. They enjoy watching people suffer. Okay. They're evil people. All right. And, I think those kinds of people are the ones that are going to be particularly dangerous after a collapse of society because, obviously there's not going to be any criminal justice system anymore. You're not going to have a rule of law. So, a lot of these sadistic cannibals are going to be wandering around and trying to act out on their biggest fantasies that they couldn't act out on before because the law was protecting people, So with no law and order and a total collapse of society, these Jeffrey Dahmer type of people are going to be wandering around and, living up the high life, living their best life in their terms, and then you're also going to have people that are not prepared and are, hungry, and they may be driven to cannibalism. All right. And they may actually actively go out and hunt people down and ambush people to get food for their families. And same thing, the cannibals are going to actively be hunting and ambushing people because they have some kind of sickness inside of them and they get pleasure out of that. All right. So you got to deal with those two types of threats, the extremely hungry, unprepared people, and then the Jeffrey Dahmer, sadistic cannibals. All right. So, with that being said, how would you protect yourself from cannibals? Okay, what are some things that you could do to protect yourself so you don't fall victim to a cannibal? All right, and just from watching a lot of movies, one thing that really stuck out to me from watching a lot of these horror movies like, Wrong Turn or The Hills Have Eyes or even a lot of your classic, Halloween type movies where you have like the killer and he's going after people and stuff like that. What really stuck out to me with all those movies, and not just the movies, but also real world sadistic killers like Jeffrey Dahmer. If you read about Jeffrey Dahmer, about how he killed people, and a lot of these cannibals and murderers, the way that they killed people is they usually ambushed people and used trickery and deception to gain an upper hand, and then they would attack from behind, or they would somehow catch you by surprise in order to overpower you and incapacitate you, and then do whatever they want, whether it's torture you, eat you alive, whatever those people want to do. So with that being said, they use ambush to their advantage. They're the type of people that are not going to face you one-on-one, in a fair fight, face-to-face, all right? Because they know that they're going to lose, unless you're dealing with somebody like, the guy from Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the chainsaw. He may be more likely to face you face-to-face because he's bigger than you and he's got a huge chainsaw, so he may feel more powerful, right? But the typical cannibals that I've read about, most of them would ambush people from behind and use ambush tactics, all right, in order to gain an upper hand on their victim and overpower them and then incapacitate them. So in order to protect yourself from that, the first most important thing is you need to, as with anything related to SHTF tactics, and protecting yourself after SHTF or even during rule of law, is you have to maintain situational awareness, okay? You want to stay alert to your surroundings at all times, and I've talked about that a lot, but I think what a lot of people misunderstand about situational awareness is that when you tell somebody that they need to be more situationally aware, people think that means that you have to walk around constantly checking your six, and looking around and scanning all around. That's not what that means. What it means is you want to maintain a level of alertness where you're aware of your surroundings, but you're not hyper aware. You're still carrying on with your normal life and whatever tasks that you're doing at the time, but you're aware of your surroundings. You have a general sense of awareness of where you are. You don't just go somewhere and blindly enter a building and not know how to get out of that building. You have a general awareness of your environment and potential hazards that are there, and risks and where potential enemies could come from. All right, so like avenues of approach, ambushing areas where you could be ambushed, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But situational awareness, it doesn't mean that you're not walking around like you're in the middle of Iraq, and you're a Navy SEAL and you're constantly looking around. That's not what it means. What it means is you have a general sense of awareness of potential hazards, choke points, ambush areas, and you're generally aware of your surroundings at all times, okay? Now, there's something called the color codes of awareness, which some of you guys may be familiar with. It was created by Jeff Cooper, all right? Jeff Cooper is a brilliant person, and he also invented the scout rifle concept. I encourage you guys to read a lot of Jeff Cooper's material, and especially the color codes of awareness and the scout rifle concept. All right, but the color codes of awareness, typically you have like 4 color codes of awareness. You have like white, yellow, orange, and red. And, red would be the highest level of alertness, which means that you're actively engaging a threat, or there's a threat around you somewhere and you're hyper aware. That would be the red level, okay? On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the white level, which means you're totally unaware. And the white level would be like if you're watching a movie, or you're sleeping, or you're playing video games, you're very focused on something and you're not aware of what's going on around you. You doze off to take a nap, you're in the white level. All right, between the white and the red, you have the yellow and the orange. And the yellow level is where you really want to be most of the time, okay? Because you can't maintain a high level of awareness without fatiguing yourself. It's impossible to be, at the red level all the time, because you're going to fatigue your mind. You're going to fatigue yourself, okay? You can't walk around like you're in an active war zone 24 hours a day. You're going to fatigue yourself. So you have to be able to know when to increase your awareness depending on the situation. So, but most of the time, if you're awake and you're not sleeping, you should be in a yellow level of alertness, which means that you're generally aware of your surroundings. You're generally aware of what's going on around you. Your senses are tuned to the environment. You don't have, plugs in music or stuff like that. Your senses are working. They're not, you're not using your senses for something else. And you're aware of potential threats and areas where threats could come from. You're aware of choke points and ambushes and danger areas and things like that, okay? So you want to stay at the yellow level most of the time. And once situations start to change, you can go up to the orange level or the red level, depending on the situation, all right? So situational awareness is important, because if one of these cannibals tries to ambush you or attack you, let's say you're outside in your homestead and you're splitting wood, and a cannibal runs out from the woods and tries to kill you. If you have a general level of alertness, you may hear him coming, or you may see him in your peripheral vision. Okay, so maintain a situational awareness. And I'll get more into some of that in a little bit more detail. The next thing is going to be stealth and camouflage, okay? You have to think, going back to how cannibals operate, they like to ambush people. They like to, use surprise to their advantage. So having stealth and camouflage is going to make it harder for them to ambush you. And not just stealth and camouflage, but maintaining a low profile. Okay, so when I say low profile, I mean don't take like a whole group of people and start walking down the middle of a main road, after the collapse of society, or on like a bridge, or in a big open area where you could be seen from long distances away. Chances are, if there are cannibals out there, they're probably going to be observing, areas like that. Okay, they're going to be overwatching, open areas, and they're going to be looking for prey. Okay, just like when you go hunting, if you're a deer hunter, okay, you sit in a tree stand and you watch the woods and you wait for a deer to come out, right? So chances are, if we're talking about cannibals, chances are they're going to be, overwatching areas where there likely could be people. All right, so you don't want to do that. You want to maintain a low profile. You want to use stealth and camouflage to your advantage so you're not spotted, okay? Another thing too is, the tactics that they would use, all right, in my opinion, is going to be similar to any other type of hunter, okay? Whether you're a deer hunter, whether you're a wild animal, okay, they're going to be, like I mentioned, they're going to be overwatching open areas like a deer hunter would in a tree stand, but they're also going to be watching areas or setting up ambushes where they think that people are going to be. All right, so like roadways, stores, places where people would get resources, any area where people would likely congregate is where the cannibals are going to be waiting for you. Okay, just like crocodiles, they sit in the water, okay, and they wait for the Cape buffalo or the wildebeests, okay, the crocodiles, they sit in the water and they wait for the wildebeest to come to the water and drink, because they know that the wildebeest has to drink water, okay? Nothing can live without water, so it's like a perfect ambush spot for the crocodile, and they just sit there and wait. And that's what any kind of predatory being, that's how they catch prey, okay? They ambush the prey. They look for places where the prey would likely be, Okay, so like me, I'm a deer hunter and I'm a big game hunter. And when I go hunting, I look for game trails. Okay, I look for game trails. I look for areas where I think the game animals would likely be, especially game trails. All right, if I'm hunting and I see like a area in the forest where there's a lot of tracks or sign, and I know that it's a game trail, that the deer or bear or whatever animal I'm hunting is moving on that trail on a regular basis, that's where I'm going to be waiting for them. Okay, I'm going to set up not far from that trail, because I know sooner or later that animal is going to walk down that trail and I'm going to be waiting for it with my rifle. Okay, so cannibals would likely use the same tactics. Okay, so if there's like popular hiking trails or popular roads, any area where people would likely be moving, through, is where the cannibals would likely be setting up to hunt people. Okay, and they could set up different types of traps. They could set up ambushes. Very similar to the way a military would ambush you. Okay, or like in military tactics. It's kind of the same principle, okay? They're gonna be looking to ambush you in a place where they know that where you're gonna be, okay? So that's why stealth and camouflage are important, and maintaining a good low profile. All right. So what that means is you want to move stealthily. You want to avoid open areas where you could easily be spotted. You want to move through brushy places where you can. Brushy areas are going to provide natural concealment and hide your movements. It's not going to be easy for somebody to ambush you when you're moving through brush, because they're not going to know where you are, and they're not, it's much harder to do. And that's why a lot of, animals like deer, for instance, or other types of prey animals, they usually hide in brushy places because they feel safe in that brush. Okay, and trust me, I'm a lifelong deer hunter, and when a deer runs into brush, they're very hard to find, okay, because it's like a maze. You don't know where they are, all right? So, try to stick through brushy areas when you're moving from point A to point B. Move at nighttime, use camouflage, light and noise discipline, okay? Don't use bright flashlights. Don't make a lot of noise, okay? Don't take your 1,000 lumen tactical light and start flashing it around everywhere like you're a SWAT officer clearing a building. All right, you're gonna light up. People are gonna see you from miles away if you're using a white, bright flashlight like that. Okay, so light and noise discipline. Avoid any kind of large campfires or cooking fires that are gonna make a lot of noise or smell of smoke. Or any kind of noise or light or smells which may attract, any kind of cannibals that may be in the area, okay? If you have to use a fire, keep the fire small, and avoid cooking smelly things that are gonna, create a lot of smell, okay? Utilize counter tracking and escape and evasion techniques when you're moving through areas, because a lot of these cannibals could be very skilled at hunting people. So they may be good at tracking. They may be good at shooting. They may be good at woods, surviving in the woods. Okay, so you need to utilize counter tracking and escape and evasion techniques, so this way they can't track you down. All right, and if you have like these big groups of cannibals that are going to be walking around after the collapse of society, they're going to do what's called, spotting and stalking. And, they're going to be like, when I go hunting for deer, when I'm looking for deer in an area, I'm looking for signs that the deer is there. I'm looking for droppings. I'm looking for tracks. I'm looking for scrapes on trees during the mating season. Okay. And they're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be scouting areas of land. They're going to be walking around areas and looking if there's any signs of people. All right, if they see a big muddy footprint on a hiking trail in a muddy area, a big footprint, they're going to immediately know that there's people, nearby, and they're going to try to find you. They're going to try to track you, okay? So utilize counter tracking. You know, minimize the amount of signs that you leave behind, okay? You're not going to be able to eliminate all of your sign that you leave behind. It's impossible. But you want to minimize the sign that you leave, so it makes it much more difficult for somebody to track you down. You know, so like avoid walking through muddy areas where you're going to leave, you know, imprinted tracks. Avoid, you know, when you're walking through the woods, you know, avoid breaking branches as you walk, okay? Because that's a clear sign of somebody moving through, is when you see brush that's broken. When you're walking through a grassy area, you know, try not to step on the grass and push down the grass, which will leave like a path that you walk through, you know. Think about all these things. Don't leave any discarded wrappers or food scraps, you know. You want to minimize the amount of sign that you leave behind, okay? Let's see, what else? You know, feces, you know, clean up your feces, all right, or bury them. And you can also periodically change directions and try to use rocky terrain, or you can create false trails by walking backwards. Okay, you can if you're concerned about being tracked, what you can do is you can periodically create a false trail by, you know, let's say you're walking somewhere, you can walk off to the side and then backtrack through the same steps that you made and create a false trail. Okay, and you can do that periodically to throw off your tracker. There's a lot of other things that you can do. You can, you know, there's so many things you can do for counter tracking. It's too much to cover in this video. It's already pretty long so far, so I'm not going to get more into that. But if you want to read about, you know, counter tracking, you know, there's a lot of books on that, and you know, there's a lot of different techniques you can use to cover up your tracks. But you know, minimize the sign that you leave behind. You know, simple things like cleaning up after yourself, avoiding, you know, walking through muddy areas where you're going to leave footprints. You know, just be smart. Use your common sense, okay? Think about what somebody would look for if they were tracking you. Just use your common sense, okay? The next thing is going to be use good tactics, okay? So we already covered situational awareness, stealth, and camouflage. The next thing is going to be tactics, okay? Use good tactics, meaning if you're moving through an area, don't bunch up together, okay? Because if you bunch up together, if the cannibals attack you, all right, you guys are all screwed because you're all in a tight group and they can take you out all at once, all right? So you never want to bunch up together. You want to spread out, and when you're moving through an area, you always want to have a good spread between everybody. You know, you don't want to be bunched into like a little tight group, okay? Because all it would take is for them to, you know, one guy with an automatic rifle could kill everybody like that in a small group. But if you spread out, it makes it harder for them to take out the entire group, okay? And that's a basic, you know, military tactic, and that's one that I highly recommend that you guys use if this ever happened, you know. So don't bunch up. Like if you watch The Walking Dead, you know, those shows, you know, like Rick and his group, they always got ambushed by different other groups because their tactics were terrible. You know, they would walk in these tight groups, and they would walk through like open areas and obvious choke points, you know, where it was just like, you know, you would have to be totally dumb to do that. And obviously it's just a fictional show, but you don't want to do that, okay? So spread out, you know, you don't want to be in a tight group. Another thing too is you want to send out scouts ahead of your main group so they can recon ahead of your main group. So this way, if something happens, the scouts will notice it first, and they can warn you before your whole group gets taken out, okay? Another thing is you want to utilize terrain to your advantage, okay? Don't set up your camp if you have to spend the night somewhere. You know, don't set up your camp in like a low ground area where you could be encircled or ambushed, you know. You want to be in a high ground. High ground is the best area to be. Or you don't want to be in like a bowl, at the bottom of like a bowl with mountains all around you and you're in like a swamp. That's the worst place to be, okay? You also want to avoid areas where there's no escape routes, okay? You always want to have at least one way out, all right, of wherever you're going. You should always have at least one escape route. You know, you know, another thing too is just, you know, avoid choke points, okay? Avoid choke points, you know, places where you can easily be funneled, okay? You know, bridges, roads, a choke point is basically anywhere that, you know, you can easily be ambushed and there's no easy escape, you know? So like if you're crossing a bridge, that's a choke point, you know? If you're going through a tunnel, that's a choke point, you know? If you're walking down a road and there's big cliffs on either side, that's a choke point, okay? You want to try to avoid crossing through those areas unless you absolutely have no other option, okay? You know, another thing too is, you know, like I said, with, you know, their hunting style of tactics, you want to look out for traps that could have been, that they could set traps on roadways and hiking trails. They may set traps to catch you, you know, all kinds of different kinds of traps. They may set up ambushes along water sources, food sources, you know, like I said, any area where people would possibly be. So you need to be familiar with that and avoid those areas. And if you have to go through those areas, you know, be very alert and, you know, have a good security plan, okay? And spread yourselves out, all right? Let's see, what else here? And I think that's pretty much it. So what would, in my opinion, now another thing too is, you know, force multipliers. You obviously want to have a force multiplier, you know, firearms, rifle, pistol, shotgun, knife, you know. If you don't have a force multiplier, you should probably try to create one, you know, because you don't know what kind of weapons they have, but firearms are very essential. You definitely want to have firearms on you. Surveillance optics will help, like if you have a thermal imager or night vision, you know, that'll help you spot anybody that may be camouflaged and waiting to ambush you, okay? And finally, you know, what would I do if I had to deal with cannibals, you know, what's a way that, if, let's say you knew that they were cannibals in an area and you wanted to get rid of them, you know, you had to take a preemptive action against the cannibals to get rid of them. Let's say you know that there's cannibals operating in your area, you know, where you have your bug out location or your bug in location. How would you get rid of those cannibals so they're no longer a threat? Well, the best way, in my opinion, and it sounds kind of crazy, is you want to bait them. What I would do is I would ask for somebody to volunteer. You know, it sounds very crazy, obviously, but I would ask for one person to volunteer and to try to get that person to walk out into like an open area where, you know, potentially the cannibals would be observing, you know, and kind of try to lure them out from their areas where they would be setting up an ambush. And then, you know, once that person lures them out, you know, then I would ambush them, you know. So I would send out one or two guys to go down, let's say like an open road or like a very obvious area where, you know, cannibals would probably be set up and looking to ambush people. I would send that guy out and I would wait for the cannibals to come out and try to attack him. And then I would attack them and destroy them and kill them all. All right. And that would be my strategy for eliminating cannibals. All right. But, you know, that's pretty much it for this video. And another thing I will say too is cross-training. Cross-training is important. You know, make sure that your group, if you have a survival group, you know, cross-train on your weapons. You know, be familiar with the other weapons that the people in your group are using, okay? Like, for instance, you know, let's say this shotgun, you know, this may not be your preferred method of self-defense, okay? But if somebody in your group has a shotgun, you better be able to use it just in case you need to use their weapon. you know, or let's say somebody in your group has a revolver and you've never shot a revolver, okay, like this 44 Magnum here. This may not be your preferred weapon. You may not like it because of the recoil, and, you know, it's not your favorite weapon. But if I'm in your group and, you know, you better learn how to use my weapons, because God forbid if something happens and you need to take my weapons, let's say I die and you run out of weapons, you need to salvage, you need to take my weapons from me and use them. Or if, let's say, I have to loan a weapon to you because your weapon fails, you know, it's good to cross-train on other people's weapons, all right, because that could happen as well, all right? So that's pretty much it. You know, I'll just summarize all the points is, you know, maintain situational awareness, stealth and camouflage. Be aware of the cannibals and how they would potentially ambush you. Use good tactics. You know, avoid bunching up together and, you know, things like that. You know, and be aware of the way that the cannibals would hunt you, okay? You know, have force multipliers, cross-train, surveillance optics, and that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.